Coming to you live from the Now Media Newsroom.
I'm Jim Check with Now Media. With me, John Carpe. Thank you for joining me again, the president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. And today we're going to talk about Canada's surrender of sovereignty. Maybe, welcome first of all.
Thanks for having me on your show, Jim. It's good to see you again.
You guys just released a report, October 20th, actually. Maybe just kind of give us the executive summary of that report and what that means to Canada.
So the World Health Organization has a bunch of regulations for the next pandemic, and they want every country to sign on. And Canada is on track, subject to a little bit more deliberations, to sign on to these regulations. If they are adopted and applied by a country, whether Canada or any other country, the country chooses to surrender its sovereignty to the Director General of the World Health Organization, who would have the power to declare a pandemic emergency and then order countries around the world to impose lockdowns, travel restrictions, face masks, vaccine passports.
Yeah, just for the people in COVID, they would be the ones that would be handing out the mandates and telling the countries what to do. It wouldn't be by province or by the feds. It would just be coming straight from the WHO.
So this would be kind of like COVID lockdowns on steroids. We've seen this movie before. In March of 2020, all of the Canadian provinces imposed lockdowns and violated our charter freedoms and imposed a lot of harm on Canadians in a futile, impossible quest to stop a virus from spreading. Now, they were not ordered by anybody to do this. However, it's interesting, they chose to follow World Health Organization guidelines. The World Health Organization, in turn, was recommending what the communist Chinese were doing in China, as if that was working well. And so we got this crazy idea that somehow we could stop the spread of the virus, even though accumulated medical wisdom in the centuries prior to 2020, millennia beyond centuries, would have told you that, no, you can't stop a virus from spreading. Nevertheless, the World Health Organization recommended the communist Chinese model of locking down populations and closing schools and isolating people and bringing unemployment and poverty and bankruptcy and isolation and so on and so forth. So we've seen this movie before. Now, with the international health regulations, if Canada signs on to those, then Canada's making a commitment that if in the future, if the Director General of the World Health Organization declares that there's an international pandemic emergency, then Canada is going to forthwith start doing whatever the World Health Organization says. Now, it's a bad move, but on the positive side, the World Health Organization has no police, no army, no courts to enforce this.
But it also, if everybody signed on to this, then we wouldn't get those differences in pockets where we got to see where certain countries didn't lock down or certain states or provinces, they did different things, and we wouldn't get to see that type of response and what the results were, right? Because then they would just say, well, this works, and and we've seen throughout history that one solution doesn't fit everywhere, right?
Well, the United States has very wisely withdrawn from the World Health Organization entirely. And just as you said, Jim, when you see what different jurisdictions are doing, we saw, for example, in the United States, we saw the North Dakota and South Dakota, two states that are right next to each other. They have similar population, similar climate, similar geography, a lot of similarities. And North Dakota locked down hard. It was more like Canada, and South Dakota had almost no lockdowns at all.
Not even mask mandates.
Yeah, free to come and go and whatever. So, if lockdowns really saved lives, if that was true, you would see massively higher death rate in South Dakota than in North Dakota. We don't see that. There's other comparisons, Texas versus California,
Florida,
Florida
yeah.
versus New York, where you just don't see these elevated death rates in the states that lock down less. And Sweden, of course, did not suffer all of the lockdown harms, and their death rates were not radically different from what we saw in other countries.
So what does this mean? Like, is it just more of a symbolic thing, or is it something where the politicians can just say, "Oh, we're not doing this. We're not taking away your freedom. This is all directed by the WHO." Is that more the?
That's the real problem, right? Because practically speaking, the World Health Organization doesn't have an army or a police force, so they can't punish a country that disobeys. And if there is a country that signed the treaty, but now it's 5 years later, 3 years later, 7, 10, 20 years later, and there's a different government that is in power, and this different government says, well, we're not going to comply. Lockdowns are stupid and futile, and they don't save lives, and we're not going to comply with this. Well, the World Health Organization just has to suck it up. They can't force a government to comply. However, even though it's not truly binding, um, it will become a pretext whereby Canadian politicians, federal and provincial, will say, well, we're just following international rules. We're just implementing international guidelines. We're honoring our international obligations. So it enables politicians to partially shield themselves from accountability. And they say, well, we're not really responsible. We have no choice. We have to honor these international treaty obligations. And the truth is, like, no, you don't. But this is it makes it harder to resist the next wave of toxic and destructive lockdowns.
Why do you think the WHO took this next step? Because they can just give the recommendations. Because in the United States, they're not signing up, but they'll say, "Oh, we'll take a look at your recommendations and we'll use them or not use them." Why did the WHO take this next step and want everybody to sign up and kind of commit, as opposed to saying, like, because they used to be just a body that recommended policy in that, as opposed to now they're kind of dictating policy and asking you to actually sign something to commit to it.
Well, power. Some people love power and they want more power. They like to exercise power over other people. I would venture a guess the reason why they're moving ahead with this, as opposed to keeping it in the realm of recommendations, is that people very often do honor the commitments that I've made that they have made. So, for example, if I'm talking to somebody about making a donation to the Justice Center, and if I say, "Hey, can I count on you to donate $1,000 between now and Christmas?" and if they say yes, it's not legally binding. It's not a contract. They don't, they can not donate, and whatever. It's not something they have to do. But once somebody has said yes, I'll give you a donation between now and Christmas, they tend to honor that. So in the same way, the World Health Organization is pushing for the formal adoption, formal acceptance of these regulations, because you're going to see more compliance, right? If a country has signed on, then unless you get a government that's very strong-willed against these regulations, people are going to go with the flow, and you're going to see most countries obeying the World Health Organization because their country, previously has made the commitment to do so.
And why? And this seems to be just like normal power creep of these politicians who just want to seem more powerful, more relevant all the time. But then, why would our government not follow the lead of the United States and say, we're not signing anything. We'll look at your recommendations as usual. We won't sign anything, and then not even run it through Parliament and not even have discussion on it and just sign it and commit to it for Canada.
You've got a government right now that many of its members are hostile to freedom. They're hostile to the free society. They believe that government should be our master, not our servant. They are not committed to defending human rights. They don't believe that. They don't believe in freedom of expression. Some of these World Health Organization regulations include provisions whereby the government can censor so-called misinformation and
Right.
disinformation, which is a frontal assault against freedom of expression. Because in a free country, you and I decide as responsible adults, we decide for ourselves what is true and false. We don't have the government making that decision on our behalf by censoring what the government deems to be misinformation. But we have our current federal government under the guise of protecting us from hate, protecting us from misinformation. They want to control the internet. They want the power to kick Canadians off the internet with Bill C-8. They want warrantless searches without a court order under Bill C-2. They want to vastly increase the number of hate speech prosecutions under Bill C-9. So you have a government currently that is hostile to freedom of expression. They're hostile to privacy rights. And so they are quite keen to be taking their orders from the World Health Organization, which also, as we saw 5 years ago with the lockdowns, the World Health Organization has no serious respect for human rights
And they
or
also got a lot of
constitutional
things
freedoms.
wrong. They also got a lot of things wrong. So, I mean, just from that perspective, they got a lot of things wrong. And, and it caused a lot of harm, unnecessary harm. And then all of a sudden, without debate in Parliament, they're just going to sign Canada up for more of the same.
Well, this signing up, if we sign on to obey bureaucrats based in Geneva, we are abdicating our own sovereignty. And it's kind of ironic that the same people who, when US President Trump talks about Canada becoming the 51st state, people get all upset and they start thumping their chest, and it's all about Canadian sovereignty, Canadian sovereignty. Canada will live forever. We'll never be the 51st state. Blah blah blah. So they're really big on Canadian sovereignty. But then some of these same people will sign on to a document that partially removes Canadian sovereignty to determine our own healthcare policies by saying that foreigners, unelected, unaccountable foreign bureaucrats get to dictate the laws under which we live, which is the very definition of the violation of sovereignty, is when foreigners determine what your laws are. In a democracy, it is we, the people, as Canadians, we decide through our elected representatives what laws we will live under. That's what democracy is. And so this is totally anti-democratic to sign on to these regulations.
The difference in what you just said, though, is led by the liberal machine and their government-funded mouthpieces that will push the messaging on Trump threatening sovereignty, and the other one, they'll push it out there as this is for your own good, and we need to do this to protect us from each other.
Yeah, well, the Justice Center has reports on our website. Lockdown harms. The data is still coming in, but it's been horrific since lockdowns were imposed in Canada. According to Statistics Canada, so not my opinion, not the Justice Center's opinion, but Statistics Canada tells us we have a 15% increase in the death rate amongst Canadian children. We have a 22% increase in the death rate among young Canadian adults under the age of 45. We have a 55% increase in the drug overdose deaths since lockdowns were imposed. And these are rates that are still persisting today. Statistics Canada tells us that after 80% of Canadians, or the vast majority, were injected twice or more than 2 times with the COVID vaccine, the number of COVID deaths actually went up by a quarter. So these are the very detrimental, harmful effects from lockdowns from last time around. And it would be a shame if we repeated that foolishness and once again started harming people based on a futile, impossible quest to stop a virus from spreading, which it was doomed to failure from the get-go.
Is it that a lot of Canadians can't add? I mean, there's a lot of surveys out there. They don't trust media. They don't trust health now, and they don't trust government. Yet as soon as they try out another one of these things, everybody's just like, yep, protect us from ourselves. It seems like this kind of thing, Like the Americans push back on it, and they usually lead. Why isn't Canada pushing back on it, and why isn't it at least being debated in Parliament? I think you've answered that, but like it's kind of very puzzling. Why, if this government's so confident this is so good for us, why would you let it stand the test of debate?
Well, I think Canadians are pushing back. I mean, when you look at what's happened with Bill C-2, this is the Strong Borders Act, which I think should be called the Strong Surveillance Act. It has all these provisions about criminalizing the use of cash and authorizing Canada Post to open mail without a warrant and giving government officials warrantless access to search our computers and cell phones, et cetera. The government has received so much pushback against Bill C-2 that they still want to move it forward, but they've put it on the back burner, and they've taken out certain parts of C-2 pertaining to immigration and refugees. They've created a separate bill, Bill C-12, which now they want to push C-12 through Parliament. It's kind of like C-2, except without all the bad parts. And that's a direct result of Canadians contacting their MPs and saying, hey, Bill C-2 is terrible, vote against Bill C-2. And the government's responded to that.
I mean, back on the COVID thing and the pandemic thing, we haven't even had an honest discussion on what went well and what didn't go well, like what we shouldn't have done, like an honest examination. The provinces have kind of done it on their own, but there hasn't been a report that's come out. I mean, you've done some stuff, but I mean, the government hasn't taken a look at it and said this shouldn't have been done, and the next time we won't do this, we might do that.
Well, there's an old saying you've probably heard. It's easy to fool people, but it's very, very difficult to persuade people that they have been fooled. And this is a problem. There's a lot of emotional inertia that the health officials, these senior bureaucrats earning big salaries, many of them with a PhD after their name, recommending utterly stupid and destructive and harmful policies. It's going to be a long time before these people come around and say, oh yeah, we were recommending very harmful, very toxic, very destructive policies that hurt a lot of people and didn't save lives. They're not going to come around to admitting that anytime soon. But you and I and other individuals can and should keep on gently pushing the envelope and pointing to facts. Like our report relies entirely on Statistics Canada to say, look, Stats Canada says we now have higher death rates amongst children, amongst young adults after lockdowns and vaccine passports. These higher death rates have persisted in place. So we've caused permanent harm to the health of Canadians, right? So you push forward the facts as reported by Statistics Canada, and it's kind of hard to argue against.
Yeah, so what can Canadians do? I mean, they can go to your website, obviously, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, read the report that you put out there. But
and contact your MP.
What's that?
Contact your MP, tell your MP to vote against bills C2, C8, C9, and that you want Canadian sovereignty preserved. So do not sign on to the World Health Organization international health regulations. So, let's preserve Canadian sovereignty.
So which countries, I know the USA hasn't signed on, which other countries of note have not signed? Do you know which ones haven't signed yet?
So there's close to a dozen. Germany, Austria, Italy, and Czech Republic are amongst the countries that have joined the United States in saying, no, we're not going to give up our national sovereignty. We're not going to violate our own democracy. And so we're approaching a dozen countries, which is a small amount of the total. We got about 200 countries in the world. Right. So if there's 10 out of 200, that's 1 out of 20. So you got 5% of the countries in the world that's are not signing on.
That's quite a few out of the G7, though, right?
It's better. It's better than 0%, right? Yeah. And as long as you've got a few countries not signing on, they are an example to Canada and other countries which either have signed on or are planning to formally sign on soon.
Yeah, the U.S. has massive influence. I mean, we just saw that with that bill they tried to pass, or that tax they tried to pass on a shipping tax that the UN was floating, like a climate tax on ocean liners, and the U.S. made some phone calls and said nope, and so that got stopped. But and like you named quite a few countries in the G7 as well. You know, Germany, Italy, the U.S. You know, did you say Japan too?
No, I think Japan is signing on to the
Well, that
international
might change too
health
because they have a new
regulations.
prime minister there too as well. But who knows? That
We'll
just
see
got
what she
elected.
does.
Yeah, she
We'll
just got
see.
elected.
Yeah,
So
that'll be very interesting to see if there's going to be a shift towards a more nationalistic,
she's a very
pro
nationalistic,
sovereignty.
conservative kind of prime minister, and I think they're quite surprised she won too. So it'll be
Yeah, well,
interesting.
at the end of the day, this is another reason to always just keep on fighting for freedom. I mean, at the end of the day, even if Canada, signs on more formally, that doesn't bind a future government in any real sense. I mean, you could say it's immoral to break your obligations, which I would say is not immoral if they are terrible commitments that should not have been made in the first place. But the World Health Organization has no army, no courts, no police force to enforce any of this. So at the end of the day, we can still do the right thing. Consider the guidance that the World Health Organization might provide. Maybe they'll have something intelligent to say a few years from now that will be different from the bad advice that we were given in 2020. We're free to listen to what they have to say, but we are not obligated to implement or obey their directives. Furthermore, another really important point, the Constitution of Canada says that healthcare is exclusively a provincial responsibility. Federal government has constitutional authority over marine hospitals, whatever they are. I don't know how many there are, but that's it. Healthcare is exclusively provincial. The Federal Canada Health Act is in violation of the Constitution. And it's not really possible, at least if our Constitution is respected, the federal government doesn't really have the authority to run healthcare in the first place. So that's another thing that the
So, is
individual
there a
premiers
charter
can fight back.
challenge there? Is there a challenge there, like a legal challenge for that, or is it just the provinces will do it at the time when it's necessary?
Well, in the past 40 years, the premiers have allowed themselves to be bribed by federal funding, and the federal government has said, if you comply with Canada Health Act, you're going to get billions and billions of dollars. And every premier in Canada for the past 40 years has been saying, yes, thank you very much. But the Canada Health Act prevents provinces from learning from each other by actually experimenting with different health policies. And we have you have countries like Japan where there are no waiting lists and they have free public health care. They managed to achieve this without the waiting lists that we have in Canada. We've got better healthcare systems, publicly funded healthcare systems. We have better models in France, New Zealand, Australia, the United Kingdom, Germany, etc. And yet the Canada Health Act makes it prevents provinces from experimenting and adopting different health policies because of that threat to withhold funding. Now, if there is a real crisis in the future with the World Health Organization, hopefully one or more premiers would say, we're not doing this. And the Constitution of Canada says that we are in charge of healthcare provincially.
Yeah, we did actually in the news show. We do news every morning at 9 a.m. We do an hour-long news show, and one of the charts we had in there this morning was Canada leads in costs per per person for healthcare, but is way behind in services delivered. And I've done an interview with a person that compares hospitals and delivery of care in different parts of the world. In Canada, definitely not anywhere near the top of some of the countries in Europe and stuff like that. With similar systems, like similar universal healthcare systems.
Yeah, we desperately need to acquire some humility and start learning from Japan and France and Australia and other countries. And there's no excuse for spending this much money and then getting all these very poor outcomes.
Yeah, and I said that I was in California recently, and I was at a conference, a longevity conference, and talking to a Florida surgeon there. He said, "Oh, you guys got free healthcare up there." I said, "Yeah, it's free if you can access it." Do you know what I mean? Like it's, and I said we did a story of a young lady that had a brain tumor, and I think it was months before she could get a scan. And he said, "Oh my God," he said, "get her down here real quick. I can get her a scan for $200, and I can get her like in the next day." I'm just, again, free healthcare, but it's not free if you can't access it.
No, and once upon a time, 20 years ago, the Supreme Court of Canada said that access to a waiting list is not access to healthcare.
No. Yeah.
And they had a good ruling that was it actually said 6 out of 7 justices said that the healthcare monopoly in Canada violates the charter right to life, liberty, and security of the person. So, in other words, a ban on private healthcare, which is sort of what the Canada Health Act tries to enforce, that ban actually violates our right to life, liberty, and security of the person, according to the Supreme Court of Canada. Sadly, the Justice Centre and other groups have sought to expand that 2005 decision. It was called Shauli, was the name of the court ruling, Shauli versus Quebec. And attempts to push that decision further have been unsuccessful to date, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know a lot of people our age that have had, like they're starting to face some health issues, and then they go and they hear the lists and the waiting lists and stuff like that, and they're choosing to go somewhere else. And that, they're the lucky ones. Maybe they have the money to do it, but like some people don't have those options. So, I mean, that's where we got to get our head out of the sand, because like we hear politicians talk about we have universal health care, free health care, but if you can't access it, and like we've had people die in waiting rooms. We've done the stories, die in waiting rooms, and then like you think about how many stories we do a month here in ER closures here throughout the year. Like you tell somebody in Lillooet that that had a logging accident or something like that, and you say you just got to drive from Lillooet over a mountain pass to go to Kamloops. It's only probably maybe 2 hours during good roads, but maybe 4 to 6 hours in a blizzard or snow conditions. What are they supposed to think? And then this is not a one-off. This is like a regular occurrence. You can go on Kelowna now and you can read the stories. It's probably going to be at least 2 or 3 a week of ER closures. ER closures.
Well, there's a lot of propaganda inertia. A lot of Canadians have been told, the human mind tends to believe what the ears have heard dozens of times or hundreds of times. So a lot of Canadians have been told from birth onwards, they've been told hundreds of times, maybe thousands of times. They've had, the CBC telling them Canada's got the best healthcare system in the world. And so people hear that over and over again. They come to believe it. But the evidence is that no, we are, yes, we're far better than a third world country, but we don't have the best healthcare in the world. And one of the reasons is that we are not living by the wisdom of the founding fathers of Canada, who in 1867 left healthcare to the provinces. Why? So that each province could innovate and design its own healthcare system. And then we would be looking at each other and saying, oh, well, BC, currently has got the terrible health outcomes, and they're getting really poor results in relation to the amount of money that we're spending. And maybe Saskatchewan or Prince Edward Island or Ontario has got really good outcomes, and they're spending less money and getting better outcomes. How are they doing that? We could learn from each other. Right now, there is very little learning going on because the federal government has effectively taken over healthcare through the Canada Health Act and threatening to cut off funding to any province that doesn't comply. So you have a federal takeover of healthcare, and provinces are not learning from each other. There's nothing to learn. It's very, very, very similar healthcare system in every province. It's a dysfunctional government monopoly which has no incentives to produce good outcomes for patients.
Because somebody just put a comment here about third world countries, and like sometimes people talk about Mexico being terrible, but I've given a number out to people a couple times that can't get like biopsies and stuff like that, and they can actually on WhatsApp talk to a doctor within minutes, and then they say you come down here for $1,200, you can get a biopsy and a scan, and it's $1,200, and you can spend a week down here and then make it a vacation. And then another friend went down there for treatment. He had 6 doctors in the room with him, consulting with him. We couldn't get 6 doctors in a room for I don't know what, right?
Hardly ever. Yeah. So it just takes some humility to say, hey, we could, first of all, to recognize reality of how bad healthcare is. Secondly, to respect our own constitution and tell Ottawa to butt out and stop running healthcare. And then thirdly, to have the humility to look at what other countries are doing, which are getting much better results than us. So that's something where the governing elites just need that humility, which they don't seem to possess currently.
You've been very busy lately, though, because it seems to be just a steady erosion of freedoms in Canada, just like this bill and this bill and this bill. When you put them all together, it's like they're kind of like coming in from everywhere. You even take a look at the Online News Act. That's a bit of censorship, and then Bill C2, and then you just add all these bills on, and pretty soon, you're not sure what you're allowed to say or do.
Well, this is why Canadians have to contact their MP as soon as possible. And I don't care if your MP is Conservative, Liberal, NDP, Bloc, Green, contact your MP and tell him or her to vote against bills C2, C8, C9, 289, C2, C8, C9. Vote against those bills and vote against signing on to international health regulations. And most politicians are followers, not leaders. And when they sense that there is strong,
they get enough of an uproar. That's what motivates them, for sure. Because let's take Gary, the public safety minister there. I mean, just his tenant there was causing him to say, "Oh no, I'll make you whole." Like they're making little side deals with these guys, right? Absolutely crazy. Anything else you want to add?
Well, appreciate you having me on your show. We're keeping busy in British Columbia as well. We are filing a new human rights complaint on behalf of a lady in Nanaimo who was barred by her local school board for she was barred from welcoming international students into her home because the school had a program whereby international students would reside with certain families. And this woman, because she's against this sexual orientation, gender identity, the SOGI policies, and because she believes that there's only 2 sexes, and she's expressed these views publicly, because of that, the school board has gone after her and said that she's not fit, she's not worthy to host an international student because of her political views. So we are providing lawyers to assist with the filing of a human rights complaint. And this is something we're doing in BC.
I got an interview for you to watch. We did it this morning with Jonathan Kay. I'm not sure if you know who that is. We used to write for National
I know
Post
Jonathan.
Also. Yeah, he wrote the Trudeau memoirs and all that. And he said, "What are you guys doing in BC?" He said, because we look from over here in Ontario and we say, "Wow, we think some of this part is a mess," but we look over there and say, "Holy cow, what is happening to BC?"
It's something else, yeah. And you've got your racist policies whereby non-Aboriginals can't get into public parks. Just an absolute disgrace. And you've got
that whole property rights thing that is going to turn into a, it's going to make a mess here in British Columbia with the Cowichan decision there on the Richmond properties there. And there's, I think, 95% of BC properties are challenged, or 95% of the land in BC is challenged. So
lots of work to do to fight against racism, because this really is racist to say that because of your ethnicity you have certain special rights that other people don't have. So race-based rights, or some people get very upset about the word race. So I would say, well, ancestry-based rights or descent-based rights or ethnic-based rights, race-based rights, whatever. The best way towards harmony, social harmony, people getting along, is one law for everybody, equal rights for all, special privileges for none. And just because your ethnic group has been living on the land that is today Canada for longer than another ethnic group shouldn't give you special rights. I don't think people of French or British descent, just because their ethnic group has been in Canada for 400 years, 500 years, should have superior legal rights over Canadian of Chinese descent or Japanese descent when their Canadian-born ancestry only goes back 1 or 2 centuries. So you would rightfully have outrage if you said, well, British Canadians and French Canadians, should have superior status over Slavic Canadians, who should have superior status over Chinese or East Indian Canadians. You'd be like, oh, no, wait a minute. We can't have different rights based on how long your ethnic group has been in Canada. Not to mention the fact that people very often marry outside of their ethnic group. So, even there, it's a whole hodgepodge. There's lots of people that'll have 2, 4, 6 different ethnicities as part of their makeup. So the only way forward towards some reconciliation is if you have equal rights for all, special privileges for none. The same law applies to 100% of the population. That's the only way forward to social harmony and peace and reconciliation and people getting along with each other.
I think one of the bigger problems in Canada for sure, and you cover off a lot of that, is just a lot of this stuff is being done under the cover of darkness. And we see a lot of these things, like they won't turn over documents. They're making deals. Right now, David Eby's making deals with, First Nations groups and, on property. We're seeing this in the Liberal government. They won't turn over documents for how many things. And then, they won't debate this surrender of sovereignty. And all these things are done under the cover of darkness. If they really are that good for us, they should be out in the open and allow it, because every Canadian has a right, because every Canadian has one vote. No, they don't. They aren't special. They think they're special, but those are our tax dollars. They're not Liberal dollars. They're Canadian taxpayer dollars. And that's what we should demand most of all, is accountability and transparency on everything.
Well, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. So if you're a good person, don't do nothing, do something. And, things might get worse before they get better, but in the end, truth will prevail over lies. And in the long run, freedom is going to prevail over tyranny.
Well, thank you, John, for being that flashlight out there and shining that on the dark corners where they like to hide stuff. And it's always great to have you on the show. And we hopefully that your light gets brighter and we can definitely flood these dark corners and scurry the rats away.
All right. Thanks for having me on your show, Jim. Have a great rest of the day.
You too. And thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.